in Proverbs chapter 23. We're looking at the 30 sayings of the wise. As I've been looking at this, it's funny how different commentaries and theologians or whatever interpret the 30 sayings differently in different places. So I'm using a breakdown from the NIV, so hopefully we'll follow through that. We're talking about wisdom, how to be wise. Wisdom, we've said, is the skill to live life according to God's plan. Can you live life according to God's plan in a skillful or in a well, what do I say, in a good way, that you're good at it? Last week we mentioned that the sayings we find in the book of Proverbs are generalizations about what's true most of the time. Again, these aren't necessarily promises that you're right 100% of the time, but they tell us what works in most circumstances. Generalizations, observations about what works in life. And so we can learn a lot from these. They'll help us be more skilled at living life according to God's plan. We started back in Proverbs chapter 22, the 17th verse, where it said, "Pay attention and turn your ears to the sayings of the wise. Apply your heart to what I teach. For it's pleasing when you keep them in your heart and have all of them ready on your lips, so that your trust may be in the Lord." So I teach you today, even you. Have I not written 30 sayings, sayings of counsel and knowledge, teaching you to be honest and to speak the truth, so you may bring back truthful reports to those you serve? So last week we started looking at these 30 sayings, and we got a little ways through there. We're ready for the first verse of chapter 23, which is actually, according to this breakdown, the 7th saying. So we're going to pick it up there, and as we go through these, they're short little snippets. You're going to already understand what some of them mean. I'll give you a little commentary, because that's what you paid to do. But hopefully we can catch on to some things here that we can apply to our lives. So Proverbs chapter 23, verse 1. "When you sit to dine with a ruler, note well what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you're given to gluttony. Do not crave his delicacies, for that food is deceptive." All right, this is a fun one to look at, but it's basically saying don't be deceived by a ruler who's buttering you up in order that he can use you or misuse you or betray you in some way later on. Daniel is kind of an example of this. Back in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, it says, "Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. He asked the chief official's permission not to defile himself this way." He was led away into captivity, and when he got into Babylon, they said, "Here's the food. We want you to be one of the king's advisors, one of the wise people, and so you need to eat up." And he was like, "That's not the only food I need." It was more of well, it was the stuff, a lot of it was contrary to the Jewish diet. And so he said, "I can't eat that stuff. I just want vegetables." And the guy said, "No, if you do that, you'll get weak, and then I'll get blamed for it, so we can't let that happen." So they had a little competition, and so for a month or two, he ate only vegetables. And when he got done, he was stronger than all the other guys. And this guy's, okay, God might know what he's talking about. Well, we don't necessarily get into that kind of predicament, where you have a ruler who has taken over and taken you into exile and laid before you all this food to deceive you and make you a ruler who will kind of betray your people. My guess is we won't run into that. But there are a lot of things that we do for people who have those positions that we want to aspire to. I would say it this way: don't let wealthy people manipulate you, or famous people. A lot of times we idolize wealthy people because, well, they have what we want. Or we idolize some actor or some athlete, and we think, man, if I had that kind of money, if I had that kind of fame, life would be so much better. And so we get sucked into all that stuff. If one of them walked in and sat with us this morning in our congregation, most of you would have been sitting there next to the person next to you, "Hey, isn't that so-and-so?" And you might get a little leery about going up. Some of you go ask for autographs. Some of you want to go up and say hi. But y'all kind of want to be seen with them, so maybe you're taking some selfies or whatever you do with that kind of thing. But if they stayed for the potluck dinner, you'd all be like, "I want to sit by him. Let's go sit by him." You know, you want to butter up to those people because you want to be seen with them. That's the person that you aspire to. They have money, they have fame, they have whatever. But I think the writer of Proverbs here is saying, don't get all goo-goo around those kinds of people, manipulate you. Let them misuse you. Pay attention to what it is they're doing and offering you. They might not even realize what they're doing is part of the lifestyle they've gotten into, and they're so far into it they don't know what the rest of us live like, and so they're used to people buttering them up and being willing to be used by them. "Hey, can I get you anything? Hey, can I help you with that?" I think what they're saying is don't get so enamored with them that you get sucked into doing whatever they ask you to do. Sometimes it's that boss that asks you to do something you know you shouldn't be doing. You know it's illegal, or you know it's immoral, but your boss asks you to do it, and you want to be boss someday, and you're kind of bettering them up, and so you go out and do it. And they start misusing you so you can take the fall for their behavior. All right, so don't get enamored with that. Don't get so caught up in that wealth and fame that other people have that you think you'll do whatever it takes to get there. That food is deceptive. You can find when you get there, it wasn't as good as you hoped it would be. Next saying, verse 8. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast a glance at riches, and they're gone. For they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. It says, don't wear yourself out trying to make a lot of money. Don't let materialism drive you to the point where you work those long hours and neglect your family because you want to get ahead and make that next fortune so you can buy more stuff that takes you away from your family and your friends. He says wealth doesn't last anyway. It says flying after wealth, basically the way it actually is worded, flying after wealth results in wealth flying away from you. As you pursue wealth, you find it harder and harder to get, and you'll find that it doesn't last long. It doesn't accomplish what you intended for it to accomplish. A lot of people who come into wealth suddenly don't want to do it. And so you find lottery winners that are broke a year or two later. Or professional athletes who are broke a couple of years after they retire. Because they don't know how to use the money. They don't use it wisely. It's gone as fast as they made it. For us, maybe it's not quite that exotic, but the stock market's crash. I know my parents had a retirement caught up in the stock market, and years ago, back in 2008 or when it was the stock market crash, they panicked and sold all their retirement and lost about half of it. Stock markets do that. Or that job you always wanted, you don't get it. Or your business fails and they close the doors and you get laid off, and now you're out looking for minimum wage jobs instead of the job you had. But things happen, and suddenly our little nest egg is even littler than it was. The wealth is gone. What do we do now? Wealth is fleeting. Being rich and having all that stuff isn't what you need, and sometimes you'll never get it, and if you do get it, it won't last. So quit trying to chase after all that stuff. Be content with your lot in life. If you have food and shelter, clothes to wear, what more do you need? Enjoy life rather than trying to accumulate stuff. If money's what you're after, you'll always be disappointed. Paul wrote in Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into the world and we take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, eager for money, have wandered far from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Now, a few verses later, he talks to people that are wealthy. He says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, because it's so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Don't put your hope, don't put your effort, don't put everything into making money so you can provide for yourself and so you hope that someday you can live a life that's enjoyable. Rather enjoy life now and be content with what you got. Saying 9, verse 6. Do not eat the food of a begrudging host. Do not crave his delicacies, for he's the kind of person who's always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart's not with you. You'll vomit up the little you have eaten and will have wasted your compliments. All right, like the earlier saying about eating with rich rulers or wealthy rulers, this is a warning about not eating or casting your lot with people who are stingy. When you figure out that they were just being polite, they didn't really want to host you, and you came over anyway, and now you're offended that they would ask you, and now they're upset about it, and you're upset about it, and everybody's upset. I guess I would turn that a little bit too and say maybe this is a good advice for not offering something just to be polite. That if you really can't afford it, or you're not willing to share it, then don't offer it. And then have somebody take you up on it, and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. And now you feel resentment towards them for accepting the offer that you made. And when you do offer something to share, then share it generously. And don't sit there the whole time thinking about how much it costs and how much I'm losing. Oh, I wish. Make yourself miserable. So when you share your stuff, share it generously. Saying 10, verse 9. Do not speak to fools, for they'll scorn your prudent words. In other words, don't waste time arguing with stubborn people. You're never going to convince them. You're not going to change their mind. And you'll just be frustrated because they're so stupid. How can they not figure this out themselves? They've already made up their mind, and arguing just opens you up to ridicule from them. Well, I can't believe you thought that. And so they start asking you questions so they can make fun of everything you're saying. You know, man, this argument's not going the way I intended it to be. Well, that's because you're arguing with a fool. They're not going to listen to your arguments because they don't care. They've already made up their mind. Matthew 7:6, Jesus says, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they'll trample them under feet, turn and tear you to pieces. They'll make light of your arguments. They'll ridicule you. They'll put you down. And suddenly you look like the idiot. So don't argue with a stubborn person. Make your point and then move on. Saying 11, verse 10. Do not move an ancient boundary stone or encroach on the fields of the fatherless, for their defender is strong, and he will take up their case against you. We talked about this last week in a couple of the other sayings, very similar. Saying number 5 was, do not move an ancient boundary stone set up by your ancestors. The second one was, do not exploit the poor because they're poor, and don't crush their needy and poor, for the Lord will take up their cause. This kind of combines those two things. Don't move a boundary stone to take advantage of the poor, because God's going to defend them. So we covered that one, right? Number 12. In verse 12. Apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. In other words, don't stop learning. Pursue knowledge, learn new things, listen to good advice. You'll never know everything. I know when I got done with school, I felt like I was the smartest guy on the planet, and I was close. But you get people who have lived life a little longer than you have, and you realize how little you really know. You'll never learn everything. So don't sit back and go, well, that's all I can handle. Keep pursuing knowledge. Seek after new things. Number 13, verse 13. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with a rod, they'll not die. Punish them with a rod and save them from death. Or some translations, of course, was, spare, that's it. I was like, withhold the rod, that's not it. Spare the rod, spoil the child, kind of thing. Yeah. Children need moral correction. They do things that are wrong. Or they do things that aren't safe. And so they need correction, both verbally, telling them, explaining to them, and sometimes physical. The point of corporal punishment is not to beat the child or to punish them, but try to get them to make a better choice the next time. To cause enough pain, if you will, that behavior becomes undesirable, because they would rather do without that, whatever it is they're doing, than suffer the consequences. And so the writer says they're not going to die from a spanking, but it might deter them from a behavior that could kill them. We talked about this a few weeks back when we were talking about the fear of the Lord, and how often, as a parent, we know what's best for our kids, but we just can't explain to them in words that they can understand. And so sometimes physical discipline and their fear of us is what keeps them from doing things they shouldn't be doing. And And so we can make them fear us enough that the behavior becomes undesirable, even though they don't understand why the behavior was undesirable. So we save them from behavior that can harm them by disciplining them. Now, when it says discipline with a rod, it's not talking about taking a stick or a rod and beating your child senseless. It was just their form of what we would do call spanking. When I was a kid, back when I was a kid, parents used to use a paddle or a yardstick or those little things for the little ball thing that bounces and, paddle paddles. That's what they were for, right? We survived it, but it kept us from doing a lot of bad things. So this isn't an excuse to abuse your child. If you're whooping them upside the head and leaving marks and bruises and cuts, that's not a good thing. But enough pain on the appropriate parts of the body that can handle that kind of pain in order to get them to stop the behavior is not a bad thing. It's not going to kill them, and it might save them from something that would kill them. Saying 14 in verse 15. My son, if your heart is wise, then my heart will be glad indeed. My inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak what is right. A parent does not take delight in disciplining their child, but when the child then makes a wise choice the next time, that does delight a parent. We rejoice when our children make wise choices. We're excited that they figured this out. Oh, my son's grown up. Oh, my daughter's there now. She's arrived. And they're making right decisions. And suddenly we're honored to be their parents. And children, if you want to honor your parents, which is one of the commandments, by the way, one of the ways is to make wise choices. And as you do the right things, your parents are honored. My child is making wise choices, and that reflects well on the parent. Verse 17, 15 saying, do not let your heart envy sinners, but always be zealous for the fear of the Lord. There is surely a future hope for you. Your hope will not be cut off. Envying sinners is wanting to do what they do. You know how you see somebody sinning, and you go, man, that's wrong. They should be doing that. But you're really thinking, oh, I can never get away with that, or I tried. I wish I could do that, but since I can't do it, they shouldn't be doing that. Well, don't do that. Don't envy the sinner. See, here's the problem. You think you're missing out on something because you see them enjoying what they're doing? And so you think, well, I'm missing out because I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm doing what God wants me to do. They aren't. And so they're engaged in a behavior that's causing a level of enjoyment that God doesn't want me to have. And suddenly we stop trusting God and say, I trust what they're doing and what I see more than I trust my Creator to know what's best for me. Well, it may be that they are having more fun than you, for now. But later, they'll have to pay the price. It might be in this life, or it might be in the next. Now understand, this isn't just talking about a person who commits a sin. We all sin and are fallen short of the glory of God. This is a sinner, someone who has turned their back on God, who disregards God, who acts contrary to God's will, and says, I don't care what God thinks, this is my life. Those kind of people have no hope. But if you trust God and do things His way, you do have a hope that can never fade away. Maybe you won't have as much fun today, but in the future, you'll be glad you didn't join them in your sin. You'll be glad you refrained and obeyed God. Because we have a hope in the future that everything will be glorious. Maybe not even in this life, but this life pales in comparison to the life to come. So we might have to wait till the next life to realize that it'll be so worth the wait. So don't let your heart envy what sinners are doing and getting away with. Because someday you'll be glad you chose to obey God. We're going to stop there. I'll pick up the rest, well, not all the rest, but the next section next week. But will we allow God to guide us? Are we ready to trust Him? As As we go through these sayings, well, I like that one, I don't like that one, that was stupid, that was irrelevant. Or do we trust that God has given us these as parameters that we can live under? Not promises, but generalizations about if you do stuff this way, life's going to work out better for you. Let's pray and ask Him to help us do that. Father, we do look around us and see or hear on the news and on the talk shows and wherever, people are always spouting philosophy and worldviews. And many times that stuff just sounds so stupid to us. And other times we find ourselves joining right in. So as we go through these Proverbs, Father, would you challenge us to think a little more wisely? To live life according to the instructions that you give us? To meet the parameters and requirements that you expected of us? Not as a duty, but because we trust that as our Creator, you know what's best for us. And so if you tell us to do something, it's not to deprive us of something, but rather to give us life to its fullest. So help us experience that life. To desire that life more than all the temporary pleasures. As we look at these sayings of wisdom, Father, would you guide our hearts and our minds, our thoughts, our spirits to obey you out of reverence for you. And then, Father, meet us where we're at. If we're just starting out on this, would you bless us in that? That we can see the benefits of obeying you. And if we've been doing it for a while, we might need to see some of those blessings now and then. But Father, I pray that we have a faith strong enough to obey even when it doesn't seem right. Even when it doesn't seem logical to us. Would you help us to be obedient to you? Father, the only way for us to trust you is to spend time with you and to get to know you. So help us. Reveal yourself to us. Help us to take the time to be with you so that we can learn who you are, so that we can trust you. We pray in Christ's name.